The sound was faint at first, barely brushing the edges of Ethan Blake's consciousness as he descended the concrete stairs of the subway station. The usual chaos of the evening commute buzzed around him, heels clicking, voices echoing, a busker's cheap speaker humming, but then there it was, a melody, fragile, deliberate, haunting, and unmistakably familiar. Ethan froze, one foot still on the step, as a single jarring truth hit him harder than any train ever could. That song shouldn't exist. No one alive should know it. He forgot the meeting he was late for, the client who would be furious, the ticking of the Rolex on his wrist. All that mattered was following that sound. He moved through the crowd as if possessed, drawn by the pull of notes that sliced through his memories like broken glass. The closer he got, the more intense the tremble in his hands became. This melody wasn't just music, it was a ghost. It was her. Under a yellow-tinted lamp near the southbound tracks, he saw the source. A woman, wrapped in threadbare layers, hunched over a cracked violin. Her posture was all wrong, her figure obscured by time and hardship, but her fingers, they danced across the strings with grace no circumstance could erase. Ethan's breath caught. His heart thudded like it was trying to claw its way out. It couldn't be, but he knew it was. "Claire," he whispered aloud, as if her name could anchor the insanity unraveling inside him. She didn't look up, but something shifted in her body, just enough to betray that she had heard. Ethan stepped forward. "Claire Whitmore?" he asked, louder, now. She froze mid-note. The melody collapsed into silence. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her head. And the moment their eyes met, the world split in two. For a second, time folded. 2009, high school auditorium, first kiss behind the curtain. Then it shattered. Her eyes widened, not with recognition but terror. Without a word, Claire dropped the violin, turned, and ran. Ethan stood rooted to the platform, his chest hollow, winded by the impossibility of it all. Claire, the girl he had mourned, the girl who vanished, the girl who was declared dead. She had just played the song they wrote together, and then fled as if he were her executioner. Nothing made sense. He picked up the discarded violin. It was cracked along the side, a cheap model, but the song it had carried was theirs, only theirs. Back in his penthouse that night, Ethan stared at the violin on his marble countertop. Every polished surface of his apartment mocked him with reflections of a man who had moved on, moved up, a celebrated violinist, founder of the Blake Foundation, the prodigy who lost his muse and turned tragedy into genius. But now, the myth had a hole in it. Claire was alive, which meant everything he had believed for 12 years was a lie, and worse, she had run from him. Unable to sleep, Ethan reached for his private folder, press clippings, yearbooks, photos of him and Claire that he'd never quite had the strength to burn. Her face stared back at him, younger, full of fire, her laugh frozen mid-motion. "Why?" he murmured to the silence. "Why did you leave?" The next morning he called an old friend, Lucas Grant, a journalist who once dabbled in private investigations. "I need a favor. Quiet, discreet," Ethan said. "It's about Claire Whitmore." There was a pause on the other end. "You mean the girl who died in that cabin fire?" Ethan closed his eyes. "She's not dead. I saw her last night." Another pause. "Jesus Christ." Ethan's voice was firm. "I want to know where she's been, who she's become, and why the hell she ran from me." For 3 days, Ethan stayed home, waiting for answers. He canceled concerts, ignored calls, and drank too much whiskey. He kept the cracked violin in his lap like it held secrets in its wood. On the 4th day, Lucas called back, "You're going to want to sit down." Ethan braced himself. Claire Whitmore vanished before that cabin ever caught fire. That body they found wasn't hers. She's been in and out of shelters since 2012. No official documents, no traceable ID. It's like she erased herself. Why? Ethan whispered. Lucas's voice was low. Maybe because someone wanted her gone. The idea unsettled Ethan in a way he couldn't explain. He thought he knew pain. Losing Claire had nearly broken him. But this was worse. It was betrayal dressed as protection. It was questions that twisted inside him like barbed wire. Someone had taken Claire from him, and Claire, if the fear in her eyes meant anything, believed he had been part of it. He spent that night driving through the city, searching every subway station and shelter Lucas had mapped out. He showed her photo to anyone who'd listen. Most shook their heads. One man, a cleaner near the Riverway station, said, "Yeah, violin girl. She plays Tuesdays, doesn't talk, doesn't smile, but man, she can play." Ethan's heart leapt. It was Monday night. He waited, all through the cold, early hours. At 8:07 a.m. she appeared. Same tattered coat, same violin case, same guarded eyes. She saw him instantly and stopped. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, just raised the cracked violin in the air, slowly. Her lips parted, her hands clenched. Then softly he said, "Please, just talk to me." Claire's eyes filled with panic. Then, shockingly, they filled with tears. "Ethan," she whispered, the first time she had said his name in 12 years. And then, just like before, she turned to run, but this time Ethan chased her. The chase didn't last long. Claire was fast, but malnourished and weighed down by layers of clothes meant more for survival than escape. Ethan caught up to her half a block away, not with force, but with words. "Claire, stop! I'm not here to hurt you." She spun around, chest heaving, eyes wild. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "You don't understand." Her voice was raw, like it hadn't been used for anything but screaming inside her own head. Ethan held up his hands, slowly, as if she were a cornered bird. "Then explain it to me. Please, just tell me what happened." She looked around the street like it was watching her. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not safe." The words landed like a slap. "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked. "Safe from what?" Claire took a step back, but her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground. "You haven't eaten," he muttered, more to himself than her. "Let me help." "I don't need your help," she snapped, but she didn't pull away. "Then let me walk with you. Just a block. If you say one word after that, I'll go." Claire hesitated, then nodded slowly. They walked in silence. 1 block became 3. She led him into a tiny church-run shelter tucked between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. The sign read, "St. Martin's Mercy House." It smelled of soup and bleach. "This is where I sleep sometimes," she said, folding her arms across her chest like armor. Inside, a nun gave her a concerned look, but didn't stop her. Claire led Ethan to the back, where a makeshift music room sat half-lit and nearly empty. A busted upright piano stood in the corner. "This is where I come to remember who I was," she said, her voice softer now, "and forget who I became." She sat down and played a few hesitant notes. The sound was warped, but her touch was unmistakable. "That melody you played," Ethan said, "it was ours." Claire's hands froze over the keys. "I never stopped playing it," she murmured, "even when I wanted to forget you." He sat across from her, careful not to get too close. "Then tell me why. Tell me why you vanished. Why you never came back. Why everyone thought you were dead." Claire turned to him slowly. "Because I almost was. And because the people who saved me said you would be too, if I didn't disappear." Ethan's body tensed. "Who?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," he replied. "They stole you from me. I have a right to know." Claire looked him in the eye. "Ethan, what do you remember about that summer before the fire?" He blinked, caught off guard. "I remember we were going to run away to New York. I remember your dad hated the idea. I remember you stopped calling one day, and then a week later, they said you were gone. I didn't stop calling, she said. My phone was taken, my accounts erased. The cabin they found burned? It wasn't an accident. It was staged. Ethan leaned forward, stunned. But the police bought, she said flatly. The only thing they didn't control was the music. That song, it's the only thing I had left that was mine. Ethan felt like the room was tilting. Who did this to you? She hesitated. Do you remember the Whitmore Trust? My family's estate? He nodded. Yeah, it was frozen after the fire. There was some legal battle. Claire's eyes narrowed. The Blake family was on the other side of that battle. My family? Ethan asked, incredulous. No, my parents would never. Your uncle, maybe, or your grandfather. Someone powerful enough to want me gone. Someone who thought I was a threat. To what? Ethan asked. Claire leaned closer. I think I found something. Back, and then something about how the trust was being used to launder money through music schools and scholarships. Ethan's heart sank. That's why they erased you. She nodded. That, and because I loved you. They thought you'd never leave if I stayed. They needed you loyal. A long silence stretched between them. So you ran, he said finally. They made me, she corrected. And they made sure you believed I was dead. Ethan stood and began pacing. This is insane. We need to go to the police. Tell someone. Claire shook her head. They'll bury it again. They always do. I've tried. Then we go public, Ethan insisted. I have a platform, a voice. They'll ruin you, she said, her voice sharp now, just like they did to me. Ethan stopped. You think I care about that? Claire looked up at him, and her eyes softened for the first time. No, I think you're still the boy who tried to teach me Chopin with a broken metronome and a Coke can. But I also think you don't know what you're walking into. Ethan sat back down, closer this time. Then help me understand. Let me be the one who fights with you this time, not the one you protect by vanishing. Claire looked at him long and hard. You sure? Dead sure. She exhaled. Then meet me here tomorrow night. I'll show you everything. Ethan nodded. I'll be here. He stood to go. At the door, he turned back. Claire. Yeah, she said quietly. I never stopped loving you. She didn't respond. But as he left, she played their melody again, slow and trembling, like hope. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. His penthouse, usually so quiet and sterile, felt suffocating. Every tick of the grandfather clock echoed louder than it should. His mind ran in circles, Claire's face when she spoke of the trust, the fear. In her voice, the weight of 12 years of silence finally unraveling into truth. He thought about the Blake name, the family legacy built on music, prestige, and money. How much of it had been a lie? By morning, he had made up his mind. He couldn't wait until evening. There were questions too urgent to let rest. He dressed, grabbed his keys, and drove across the city to his Uncle Gregory's estate. Gregory Blake had always been the family's invisible hand, the man behind the curtain. He never took the stage, never gave interviews, but his fingerprints were on every boardroom door, every sealed file. If anyone had answers, it was him. The estate was quiet, the kind of rich silence only old money buys. Ethan was buzzed in by a housekeeper who looked startled to see him. Mr. Blake is in his study, she said cautiously. Ethan walked past oil portraits and marble sculptures until he reached the heavy double doors. Without knocking, he pushed them open. Gregory looked up from a glass of scotch, unfazed. Nephew, he said coolly, to what do I owe this early morning offense? Ethan didn't bother with small talk. What did you do to Claire Whitmore? Gregory didn't blink. That's a dangerous question for many reasons. Ethan stepped forward. She's alive. A pause. Gregory set down his drink. And she's still foolish enough to show her face. You tried to erase her, Ethan said. Why? Gregory stood slowly, walked to the window. Because she was asking the wrong questions. Because your mother and I were weeks away from sealing a multi-million-dollar deal involving the Whitmore Trust. You stole from them, Ethan said. Gregory turned, the polite facade slipping. We saved the trust from collapse. We absorbed it, consolidated it. It was all legal. Except Claire's mother didn't agree, Ethan said. She threatened to go public. That's why the cabin was torched. Gregory's silence was confirmation. You're a monster, Ethan whispered. Gregory approached him, voice low and firm. You have no idea what you're playing with. That girl is a match in a room full of gasoline. Walk away. Let sleeping ghosts lie. Ethan's hands curled into fists. I'm going to expose you. Gregory smirked. And how will that go? You'll lose your sponsors, your board seats, your credibility, all for a girl who disappeared without a trace. She didn't disappear, Ethan snapped. You buried her. Gregory didn't flinch. Be careful, Ethan. Family has long memories and longer knives. Ethan turned to leave. If anything happens to her again, I'll burn this family legacy to the ground. As he left, Gregory called out, Then you better start gathering matches. Later that day, Ethan returned to the shelter early, but Claire wasn't there. He waited for hours, nerves fraying with every tick of the clock. Finally, at 8:13 p.m., she arrived, hood up, violin case in hand, a heavy canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Sorry, she said breathlessly. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. Were you? Ethan asked. She shook her head. Not tonight. They walked together in silence for several blocks until Claire stopped in front of an old bookstore, its windows dusty, its sign half-lit. Come on, she said, pulling out a key. This place closed down 10 years ago. The owner used to be my mother's friend. Left it to rot when he died. But I kept a copy of the key. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and memory. Claire led him past rows of forgotten shelves to a trapdoor behind the counter. Down a narrow staircase was a hidden room, cold and silent. There was a desk, a cot, and dozens of files stacked neatly in waterproof boxes. This is where I lived. After I ran, after the fire. Ethan looked around in awe. You stayed here all these years? She nodded. On and off. It's not safe, but it's mine. She handed him a folder. This is everything I found before they came for me. Records, fake invoices, shell companies. Ethan opened the folder. Bank statements with the Blake Foundation's name on them. Transfers routed through the Whitmore Trust. Donations that never arrived. How long have you had this? Since the summer before the fire, Claire said. I tried to tell my mother. She tried to confront your uncle. A week later, she was dead. Ethan's face darkened. This is enough to take to a journalist, a lawyer. Claire shook her head. It's not enough unless you're someone powerful, which is why they needed me to vanish. I am someone powerful, Ethan said, and now I have the truth. Claire sat on the cot, tired beyond years. Then promise me something. Anything. Don't do this for me. Do it because it's right. Ethan knelt in front of her. The moment I saw you in that subway, everything changed. This isn't just about right. It's about finally hearing the truth in all the silence. Claire looked at him. Then we do it together. Above them, unseen through the bookstore window, a man in a black coat watched from across the street, a phone pressed to his ear. They found it, he whispered. Everything. What do you want me to do? A voice on the other end responded, calmly, follow them and wait for my call. They spent the next 3 nights hidden in that forgotten basement, poring over documents by candlelight. Claire had collected more than just financial records. There were audio tapes, letters, even a photocopy of a contract with Ethan's forged signature. "They used you too," Claire said as she laid out the papers. "They tied your name to the trust. If this went public without context, you'd go down with them." Ethan stared at the signature. It looked exactly like his. This would destroy me." Claire's voice was calm. "That was the point. To control you. If you ever started asking questions, they'd release this and frame you as the fall guy." Ethan sat back, the truth weighing heavier than any stage light ever had. So they were never protecting the family name. They were protecting themselves. Claire nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. "This was my father's. He kept a backup of his client communications. I never listened to it fully. I was too scared." Ethan took it. Then we listened together. They connected the drive to Ethan's laptop. Static filled the room. Then a voice, deep, smooth, unmistakably Gregory's, cut through. "You've done well, Frank. Just make sure your daughter stays quiet. If she opens her mouth, the whole operation unravels." Another voice, shaking with fear. "Claire's father. She's smart. She won't say anything if she thinks Claire's safe. Then let's give her a reason to stay gone." Claire turned pale. Her hands trembled. Ethan paused the recording. "You okay?" That's the last thing my father said before he disappeared," she whispered. "I thought they'd just threatened him, but they took him." Ethan leaned forward. "Claire, I think your father might still be alive." Her eyes widened. "After all these years?" Gregory didn't say was, he said is. "We have to find out." But the noise upstairs interrupted their thoughts. A loud bang, followed by muffled footsteps. Ethan moved fast, shutting the laptop, hiding the documents. Claire snuffed. The candle. "Go quiet," she whispered. They crouched in darkness. Heavy boots echoed on the wooden floorboards above. The front door creaked open wider. Then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the footsteps retreated. A car engine started outside. Ethan peered through a gap in the floorboards. A black SUV idled for a moment, then pulled away. "They know," he said. "They know we've found this place." Claire's voice was tight. "We have to move, now." They grabbed the essentials, the flash drive, the folder, Claire's violin, and exited through a back alley. The city outside felt more dangerous than ever. Every shadow seemed to carry weight. Every headlight felt like a target. "Where do we go?" Claire asked. Ethan's mind raced. Somewhere unexpected. They boarded a midnight train north, blending into the crowd. Ethan bought tickets under fake names, something Claire had taught him. "You're better at this than I expected," he said, as they sat in the last car. "I've had a lot of practice." Her smile was sad, but real. "You don't survive this long without learning." Hours later, they arrived at a lakeside town Ethan used to visit as a child. It was quiet, off the grid. They rented a cabin from an old music teacher Ethan remembered. "Still playing?" the woman asked Claire as she noticed the violin. Claire nodded, trying to. "Good," she said. "Music's what saves us." For 2 days, they rested. They cooked over a wood stove. Ethan played simple duets with Claire. The tension between them softened, not erased, but diffused. On the third night, they listened to more of the recording. One part stood out, Gregory mentioning a name, Madeline Quinn. "She was the Foundation's legal fixer," Ethan said. "If anyone helped erase your records, it was her." The next day, Ethan made calls, quiet ones. From payphones, a contact in New York confirmed. Madeline still worked in corporate law, still cleaned up messes, and was about to retire. "She's not," In the city, the contact said. She's in Michigan, Lakeview Hills. Final assignment, some last cleanup job. Ethan hung up. We find her, he told Claire. We get her to talk. Claire looked out at the water. What if she refuses? Then we show her the flash drive. And if that's not enough? Ethan reached for her hand. Then we remind her what it feels like to have a conscience. Claire looked at their fingers intertwined. For the first time since the subway, she didn't pull away. Then let's remind her. The drive to Lakeview Hills was long and quiet. Dense pine trees flanked the road like silent sentinels, and the clouds hung low, heavy with unshed rain. Claire sat with her hands folded over her violin case, as though it were both weapon and shield. Ethan glanced at her several times, but didn't push conversation. Something in her had shifted. She was retreating inward again, and he feared what she might be remembering. They reached the address by dusk, a sprawling lake house with white shutters and ivy crawling up its stone walls. Madeline Quinn's retirement home, Ethan muttered, cozy for someone who cleaned up financial crimes. Claire nodded. People who bury the truth usually sleep well. They parked down the street and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. A single light glowed in the front room. She's alone, Ethan said. We knock, we ask questions, we show the flash drive. Claire hesitated. No, not yet. Let me go first. Ethan's brow furrowed. Why? Because she'll be more honest with someone she doesn't recognize, someone she thinks is beneath her. She smiled bitterly. A street rat with nothing to lose. 10 minutes later, Claire knocked on the door wearing her oldest coat, hair tied messily, no makeup. When Madeline opened the door, her reaction was telling. Can I help you? She asked, crisp and cold. I'm sorry. To bother you, Claire said, voice tremulous. I'm looking for someone named Claire Whitmore. I think you knew her. Madeline's face stiffened. You've been misinformed. Please, Claire pressed. She disappeared after her family's death. I think she might have been framed. Madeline stepped back slightly. You should leave. I know you worked for the Blake Foundation, Claire continued. I know you erased files, changed names, paid people off. You can pretend, but you remember her. That broke something. Madeline's hand twitched on the doorknob. You need to go, now. But Claire leaned in, voice steady. She's not dead. She's alive, and she remembers everything. Madeline stared at her, realization dawning. Claire. It wasn't a question. Claire stepped back. You should talk, before someone else makes you. Ethan appeared behind her then, stepping into the porch light. Hello, Madeline. The older woman's eyes widened. Mr. Blake. Can we come in? He asked. She looked at them both, her mask cracking. Then slowly she nodded. Inside, the lake house smelled like cedarwood and old perfume. Madeline poured herself a drink with shaking hands. I knew this day would come, she said. Did you know I was alive? Claire asked. Madeline hesitated. I suspected, after the fire. They said the body was yours, but the dental records were rushed. I raised a concern. And Gregory? Ethan asked. He overruled it. Madeline sat heavily. I was a fixer. I dealt in shadows. Gregory's orders were to clean your name from every ledger, Claire. To erase your mother's accusations, to make the trust a clean acquisition, and to ensure Ethan never found out. Claire stared. Why? Because your mother threatened to expose a laundering network that stretched across 3 countries. The trust was the key. Ethan opened the laptop and played the recording. Madeline paled. You have this? We have more, Claire said. We need you to go on record. Madeline's laugh was hollow. You think I'll survive that? Ethan leaned forward. You won't survive the guilt if you don't, and we'll release everything anyway. Your silence won't protect anyone anymore. The lawyer stared at her drink. "I kept a file, my own insurance. If I give it to you, it's the end of everything." Claire nodded. "Then let it end, so something better can start." For a long moment, Madeline didn't speak. Then, slowly, she rose and walked to a bookshelf. Behind it, hidden in a hollowed-out panel, she retrieved a thin metal box. Inside were documents, signed statements, offshore account details, all tied to the Blake Foundation, and a letter, handwritten, with Claire's father's signature. "He tried to warn the public," Madeline said softly. "He was killed 2 days after writing this." Claire took the letter, hands trembling. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Thank you." As they left, Madeline followed them to the porch. "They won't let this go quietly," she warned. "Then—" "We won't go quietly either," Ethan replied. "This ends now." But as they got into the car and drove off, headlights flicked on behind them. A black SUV pulled from the trees and followed at a distance. "We're being watched," Claire said. Ethan nodded, eyes on the mirror. "Then let them watch. We're done hiding." The SUV stayed 3 car lengths behind, never overtaking, never slowing. Ethan kept his eyes on the mirror while Claire clutched the metal box with white knuckles. "Should we call the police?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "And say what?" Ethan said, jaw tight. "That a car is following us? They'll ask for proof, names, motives. All we've got is the truth, something law enforcement hasn't exactly been a fan of lately." Claire glanced back. "Then what do we do?" "We don't go back to the cabin," Ethan said. "That's the first place they'll check. We need somewhere no one would expect." Claire thought for a moment. "There's a music conservatory, about an hour west, abandoned, but I stayed there once. It has no security, no cameras, just old walls and pianos." They drove without headlights, once they left the highway, down a winding gravel path lined with trees. When they arrived, the conservatory loomed like a haunted memory, its brick facade worn by time, the stained glass windows cracked. Ethan parked in the shadows, and they slipped through a side door Claire had once jimmied with a fork. Inside, the air was cold but dry. The building still carried echoes of its past, forgotten scales, rehearsed arias, failed dreams. "This way," Claire said, leading him through hallways that moaned underfoot. They found a small practice room in the back, its walls lined with soundproof foam and yellowing sheet music. A grand piano sat in the corner, its keys dusty but intact. Claire lit a few candles she had stashed in a supply closet years ago. "No one ever came to this wing," she said, "not even when it was open." They sat on the floor, the box between them. "So what now?" Claire asked. "Now," Ethan said, "we make sure this gets out." He scanned the documents again. Account. Numbers, letters, old receipts. It was enough to ruin half the Blake board and possibly indict Gregory, but only if the media published it. He opened his laptop and encrypted the files. "I'll send this to Lucas," he said. "He's already suspicious of my family. If anyone will publish it without getting scared off, it's him." Claire reached for the flash drive, hesitated, then slid it toward him. "Then do it." Ethan uploaded everything. The files took longer than expected. The signal was weak. As the upload bar crept forward, they both stared at the screen like it was counting down to war. Suddenly a sharp sound echoed down the hall, a door slamming. Claire shot to her feet. "They found us!" Ethan stood too, grabbing the box. "This place has multiple exits, right?" "Through the back rehearsal room," she whispered. They moved quickly, feet silent on the dusty floor. The hallway was pitch black. Then a flashlight beam flickered ahead. "Go!" Ethan urged. Claire led the way, ducking into a side room. They crawled beneath a broken riser and waited, breath shallow. Voices followed. "Check the west wing," one said. "She has the evidence." Claire's eyes widened. Ethan held her hand tightly. "We can't outrun them forever," she whispered. "We don't need forever," Ethan whispered back. "Just 10 more minutes." A loud crash came from the other end of The hallway. Then shouting. Footsteps thundered past the room. Ethan peeked through the crack beneath the door. The men were chasing someone else? That wasn't us, he murmured. Claire looked confused. What do you mean? Ethan stood, opened the door cautiously, and found Lucas standing at the end of the hallway with a crowbar and a smug grin. You're welcome, he called out. Now let's get the hell out of here. They ran. Lucas led them through a hidden service tunnel beneath the conservatory. I traced your burner signal when you sent the files. Figured you were in trouble. I was right. Claire blinked. You baited them. Lucas shrugged. I'm a journalist. Risk is the only part of the job that pays in adrenaline. They emerged into the woods behind the conservatory. Lucas's car was waiting, engine running. The files are backed up, Ethan said as they drove. They're ready to go. And go they shall, Lucas replied. But there's one problem. If I publish this now, your family will know exactly where you are. You need to vanish, at least until it hits the newsstands. Claire looked out the window. Then we vanish. Ethan nodded. One last time. Lucas handed him a folded map. I know a place, off-grid, no one for miles, just trees, water, and time to breathe. Ethan turned to Claire. You ready? She nodded slowly. Not to run, but to survive. Behind them, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Too late, too far. The night stretched wide and uncertain ahead. But for the first time in 12 years, they weren't fleeing. They were fighting back. The safe house wasn't much, a dilapidated fishing cabin at the edge of a forgotten lake. No electricity, no reception, no neighbors for miles, just towering trees and still water that reflected the moon like a polished mirror. It was the kind of place built for endings or beginnings, depending on how one looked at it. For Ethan and Claire, it was both. They settled in as best they could. Lucas left them with a week's worth of canned food, a crank radio, and a prepaid satellite phone for emergencies only. Claire unpacked her violin, setting it gently beside the window. Ethan laid the documents out again, double-checking every page. They'll retaliate, he said, if not publicly, then in ways we can't anticipate. Claire leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Let them. I'm done hiding. The days passed slowly. In the mornings, they took walks around the lake. Ethan picked wild blueberries. Claire sat on the dock, playing old songs to the wind. At night, they built fires and talked, not about revenge or survival, but about life. Claire told him about the years she'd spent wandering from shelter to shelter, never staying long enough to form attachments. Ethan told her about the stage, lights, the tours, how hollow applause felt without her in the crowd. One evening, Claire asked softly, Do you remember the first time we played together? Ethan smiled. Spring showcase, we didn't rehearse once. And still got a standing ovation, Claire said, because we played from memory, from trust. Ethan looked at her, something deeper stirring behind his eyes. I never stopped playing with you. Not really. Every performance, every note. It was you I was trying to reach. Claire turned away. Then why didn't you come looking? I did, but I believed them. I believed you were gone. Her voice cracked. I waited for you, even when I told myself not to. Silence fell, dense and honest. Ethan reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Not this time. Later that night, they lay on the floor, staring at the cabin's wooden ceiling. Rain tapped the roof in uneven rhythm. What happens after the story breaks? Claire asked. We go public. Testify if needed. Clear your name. Burn everything. They built. Ethan turned to her. Then we rebuild something better. The next morning the sky was clear, but the air felt strange, heavy, tense. Claire was heating water when she froze. Do you smell that? Ethan sniffed the air, burnt wood. He rushed outside. Smoke rose in the distance, too close. They found us, he said. Claire stepped out behind him. The forest's dry. If that fire hits the trees, it'll spread. Fast. They didn't wait. They packed what they could. Flash drives, documents, violin, water bottles, then ran. Through the trees, over moss-covered rocks, Ethan's lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Behind them, flames cracked through the underbrush, greedy and fast. At one point, Claire tripped on a root. Ethan scooped her up without missing stride. They reached a ridge overlooking the lake. Smoke already darkened the edges. "There!" Claire pointed to a canoe half buried in reeds. They dragged it to the shore and pushed off. As they paddled toward the center, the cabin's silhouette vanished behind a curtain of smoke and fire. Claire stared at the flames in silence. "That was the last place I had peace." Ethan reached for her. "Then we'll make another place." They floated until the smoke cleared. When they came ashore, miles from where they started, Ethan called Lucas. "The cabin's gone. Someone torched it." Lucas cursed under his breath. "Then it's time. The article goes live tonight. Brace yourselves." They found refuge in a small inn by the highway. Claire took the first hot shower in days. Ethan sat by the window, watching the sky turn orange and pink. That night, just past midnight, Lucas texted, "It's out. Front page. International pickups. You're free, but freedom came at a cost." By morning, Claire's face was all over the news. "Survivor of financial conspiracy speaks out," the headlines read. She watched with cautious relief as her name became more than a ghost. "It's real," she said. "They can't deny me anymore." Ethan took her hand. "No, they can't." But the story wasn't over. At 2:17 p.m., Claire's satellite phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She answered. A male voice, shaky, hesitant, spoke one word. "Claire." Her breath caught. "Dad." Claire couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The voice on the other end repeated, "Claire, it's me. It's Dad." Ethan moved, closer, alarmed. "Claire?" She held up a hand, eyes locked on the wall as if staring through time. "Where are you?" she finally whispered. How are you alive?" the voice faltered. "I've been hidden, protected for years. They thought I was dead too." Claire's knees buckled and Ethan caught her, helping her into the nearest chair. "You faked your death?" she asked. "No, they tried to kill me. I survived by accident, barely. A man helped me disappear, changed my name, no contact, no trace. It was the only way." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "And all this time, you never reached out?" "I wanted to," her father said. "But they were still watching. Until this week. Your story went public, the article, the documents. They think I'm gone for good. They've stopped looking." His voice trembled. "And when I saw your name, I knew it was safe." Ethan took the phone. "Where are you now?" A pause. "North Dakota. Rural clinic. I've been working under a false ID as a night janitor." "Send us coordinates," Ethan said. "We'll come to you." Claire's voice was thin. "Are you okay? Are you safe?" Her father gave a tired laugh. "Safe enough. But I won't be for long. Once they realize I'm alive, they'll come for me again." Claire looked at Ethan. "We need to get to him." Ethan nodded. "We will, but we need to be smart." The voice on the phone lowered. "There's more, Claire. About your mother. About what she uncovered before she died. And there's a letter. For you." Claire's breath hitched. "You have it?" "It's in a safety deposit box under a false name. I'll give you the key when we meet." After hanging up, Claire sat in silence for a long time. Finally she said, "I thought I buried them both. I grieved them, lived in that grief for years." Ethan gently said, "You didn't bury them. You buried what they were forced to become." She turned to him. "I don't know how to feel." "You don't have to know. You just have to go see him." The trip to North Dakota was long, through stretches of plains and empty roads that made the world feel endless. They arrived at the clinic under the cover of night. Claire wore a scarf, dark glasses. Ethan waited in the parking lot while she slipped inside. She found her father in a back room, sweeping the hallway. Time had changed him. His shoulders were thinner, his hair white, but his eyes were unmistakable. They stared at each other for a moment, unsure whether to cry or speak. Then, without a word, she ran to him, and he dropped the broom and held her like he'd never let go again. They didn't speak for minutes, just held on. Finally, Claire pulled back, tears wetting her cheeks. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I thought I was too," he said. "But you brought me back." Later, in a nearby motel, he opened a worn leather satchel and took out an envelope. "Your mother wrote this the night before the fire. She knew something was going to happen." Claire opened it slowly. Her mother's handwriting danced across the page, equal parts strength and sorrow. "My Claire, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong. Know that I never wanted you to carry this burden. But you must know the truth. The trust isn't just a legal entity, it's a gate. Behind it are people with power who don't deserve it. If they silence me, they'll try to silence you too. Run, but never forget who you are. And never stop playing our music. It's where the truth lives." Claire finished reading with tears falling freely. Ethan read over her shoulder, his own, throat tight. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "She believed in you. She believed music would be your way back." That night, they hid at another safe house arranged by Lucas. By morning, headlines were exploding. "Survivor's father emerges from 12-year exile." The media frenzy had become unstoppable. Gregory Blake was under federal investigation. Anonymous sources, likely Lucas, had fed more documents to reporters across the globe. But Ethan wasn't celebrating. He was watching Claire. She stood at the window, letter in hand, violin on her back. "What happens next?" she asked. "Whatever you want," he replied. "Do we disappear again?" "No," Ethan said. "We step forward." Claire looked back. "Then let's finish what we started." 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. A gala event, hosted by the Blake Foundation itself. Gregory Blake's last desperate move to preserve reputation. A press conference disguised as a charity fundraiser. The irony wasn't lost on Claire. "He wants to control the narrative before it crumbles," she said, handing the invitation to Ethan. "Or bury it beneath champagne and cameras." Lucas agreed. "He's cornered, but he's not beaten. If he senses vulnerability, he'll strike." Claire stared at the envelope. "Then let's give him a show, one he'll never forget." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You want to go?" "Not just go," Claire said. "I want to perform." It was madness, dangerous, but perfect. Ethan called a few of his trusted contacts, stage managers, venue coordinators, PR agents still loyal to him. A plan formed. Claire would take the stage, not as a ghost, not as a symbol, but as herself. They would confront Gregory in front of the world, not with accusation, but with music. Their melody, the one no one could claim but them. The night of the gala arrived fast. The venue, a grand concert hall in downtown Chicago, was adorned with golden banners and blinking lights. Cameramen buzzed, politicians, celebrities, donors, all in attendance. Gregory Blake stood beneath a crystal chandelier, shaking hands like a man untouchable. In the wings, Claire stood in a simple black gown, violin in hand, heart pounding. Ethan adjusted her mic discreetly. "You okay?" She exhaled. "I'm terrified, but I'm ready." A familiar voice behind them said, "You look just like your mother." Claire turned. Her father, dressed in borrowed clothes, nodded solemnly. "I'll be watching from the wings, just like she used to." The MC called Ethan's name. He stepped into the spotlight, applause rising. "Thank you," he said, scanning the crowd. Tonight was supposed to be about legacy, but legacies built on lies can't stand." Murmurs rippled. Cameras shifted focus. Ethan continued. "The Blake Foundation has supported many causes, but it has also hidden terrible truths. Tonight I won't tell you those truths. I'll let someone else do it. Through music." He stepped aside. The lights dimmed. Claire walked on stage. The audience fell into stunned silence. Some recognized her. Others stared in confusion. Gregory Blake's face turned to stone. Claire stood center stage, violin poised, her breath shaky. Then she played. It began with the melody she and Ethan had written in high school, fragile, unfinished, then grew, layered with pain, with hope, with years of silence transformed into sound. Her bow moved like memory itself. The audience didn't breathe. Even Gregory, seated in the front row, was frozen. Halfway through, images began to play behind her, projected news clippings, court documents, photos of her mother, her father, the burned cabin. Every note matched every revelation. By the end, Claire wasn't just playing, she was unraveling history. As the final note faded, the audience erupted, not in applause, in stunned stillness. Then, slowly, one person clapped, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Claire lowered her violin, tears in her eyes. Ethan joined her on stage. Claire looked out into the crowd. "My name is Claire Whitmore," she said, "and this is my truth." Security closed. In on Gregory. The FBI stepped forward. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Gregory's face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," he shouted. But no one was listening to him anymore. Afterward, in the quiet backstage, Claire sat in a dressing room staring at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was new, unfamiliar, but strong, whole. Ethan walked in. "They're saying your name out there, not as a scandal, as a survivor." Claire smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure I'd survive this night." "You did more than survive," he said. "You rewrote the ending." Claire stood, looked him in the eyes. "We did." They embraced. And for the first time, it wasn't out of fear or desperation. It was simply love, solid, undeniable. As they left the venue hand in hand, Ethan whispered, "You saved more than yourself tonight." Claire looked at him. "I know, but I'm ready to live now, not just save." And behind them, the final echo of their melody still danced through the hall. The following morning, headlines flooded the world. Claire Whitmore breaks silence at Blake Gala. Blake dynasty implodes under violin's cry. Music. That exposed a lie. News stations looped the footage of Claire's performance, commentators debated the scandal's reach, and thousands flooded social media with messages of solidarity. But while the world buzzed, Claire felt still. She sat alone in Ethan's studio apartment in Chicago, now a sanctuary of quiet after the chaos. Her violin rested in the corner, beside a bundle of white lilies someone had left at the theater. The scent filled the air, crisp and faintly nostalgic. She traced the lines of her mother's letter again, over and over, until the paper felt like part of her. Ethan came in quietly, 2 mugs in hand. "Chamomile," he said. "It's all I had." She took one. "Thanks." He sat beside her. "How are you feeling?" Claire paused. "Lighter, but not whole." Ethan nodded. "That makes sense. Wholeness might take time." She gave him a tired smile. "Everything does." Later that afternoon, they met with a lawyer. The lawsuits were beginning. Gregory Blake had been formally charged with obstruction, fraud, and conspiracy. Several board members were under investigation. But that wasn't Claire's focus. "I don't want money," she told the lawyer. "I want control, over my name, over the Whitmore Trust. My mother built something real. I want to rebuild it for people who need it." The lawyer blinked. "That's bold." "It's necessary," Claire said. That evening, Ethan received a call from the conservatory board. They offered him a lifetime position, head of the youth orchestra, artistic director, whatever he wanted. He laughed, turning to Claire. "Funny how the world changes when you stop pretending. Are you taking it?" she asked. He paused. "Only if you join me as co-director." Claire stared at him. "You serious?" "Completely. You're the better teacher. I'm just good at speeches." She laughed for the first time in days. "Let me think about it." "Think fast," he said. "Auditions start next month." Days became weeks. The media moved on to other scandals. But Claire remained a quiet force. She worked with lawyers to restore the Whitmore Trust, now rebranded as the Legacy Fund, focused on music therapy, education for trauma survivors, and scholarships for underserved youth. Her first initiative? Violins for Shelter Kids. The project caught national attention. Interviews flooded in. Claire turned down most of them. "The story's told," she said. "Now it's time to write something new." One night, while cleaning out her old storage box, Claire found something she hadn't seen in years, a faded music notebook. Inside were scribbles, half-finished compositions. One was labeled "For Ethan." She ran her fingers over it, the ink barely legible. Then she sat at the piano and played it through, rough, uncertain, but full of memory. Ethan walked in mid-melody. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, listening. When she finished, she looked at him. "It's not perfect." "Neither are we," he replied. "But we're still music." She leaned against his shoulder. "I miss this, us, the silence that never felt empty." "It's yours again," Ethan whispered. "The music, the silence, all of it." Weeks later, they performed together at a small community center. Just a few rows of folding chairs, some old friends, and a room full of kids holding second-hand instruments. Claire stood in front of them, her voice steady. "Music saved me," she told them. "And I think it can save you too." They played the piece again, her mother's favorite. This time there were no lights, no cameras, just sound, pure and forgiving. Afterward, one of the girls asked, "Did you write that?" Claire smiled. "Not all of it, but I lived it." And in that modest room, far from scandals and stages, she felt something she hadn't felt in over a decade. Home. The seasons shifted. Autumn painted the city in gold and rust, and the winds carried a chill that whispered of change. Claire walked through the conservatory grounds, now partly reopened under the Legacy Fund's banner. The air buzzed with the distant hum of students practicing scales, laughter echoing from rehearsal rooms. For the first time in years, life was no longer about surviving. It was about building. She stopped by a bulletin board near the entrance, where a new flyer had been posted, full recital, featuring original works by Ethan Blake and Claire Whitmore. She smiled faintly. 10 years ago she would have torn it down in panic. Now it felt right. Real. Inside the main hall, Ethan adjusted chairs, tuning forks clinking as he arranged the space for rehearsal. "You're early," he said without looking up. "You're always early," she countered. "You like pretending I'm the unpredictable one." He grinned. "Keeps me humble." Claire walked to the front of the stage and stared out at the empty seats. "Still feels surreal." Ethan joined her. "This place? No, being seen, heard. It's like I spent so long fading, I forgot how solid the world can feel." "You're not fading anymore," he said. "You're leading." She turned to him. "I couldn't have done this without you." "No," he replied softly. "You just needed time. And someone to remind you what your voice sounds like." They spent the next hour rehearsing with their students. It was messy, chaotic, beautiful. Young violinists stumbled through harmonies. Percussionists lost the beat. And yet it was everything Claire had once dreamed of. A girl named Lila, no more than 12, watched Claire intently through every measure. Afterward, She approached. "Miss Claire, how do you play without shaking when you're scared?" Claire knelt down. "I don't. I just play anyway." Lila blinked. "That's allowed." "It's the only way," Claire said, handing her a sheet of their original score. "This one's yours to try." That night Claire visited her mother's grave. The cemetery was quiet, save for the wind threading through the trees. She knelt, placing a folded program from the upcoming recital beside the headstone. "I wish you could see it, Mom. I'm using the trust for something better. You were right. Music was the way." She sat in silence for a while. Then, as if remembering an old ritual, she hummed the lullaby her mother used to sing, its notes soft, vulnerable, steady. She didn't cry, not this time. This time she felt proud. Later, in their shared apartment, Ethan cooked dinner, while Claire organized sheet music. "You think we're ready for the recital?" he asked. "The students." "Us." Claire looked up, thoughtful. "We're never really ready, but we're always enough." They ate in comfortable quiet. Afterward, Claire played the new composition she'd been working on, something unnamed, improvised. It shifted between minor and major, never settling, full of hesitation and courage. When she finished, Ethan stood and kissed her gently on the forehead. "That's the one," he whispered. "That's the piece we open with." Over the next days, the conservatory filled with excitement. News had spread of Claire's performance, not because of scandal, but because of sound. Survivors, students, musicians from all over were traveling to hear her. But Claire didn't care about the attention. She only wanted the kids to feel what she once did, the first time music felt, like breathing. One evening, Lucas visited the hall during rehearsal. He watched from the back as Claire guided a trio through a difficult bridge. Afterward, he approached her with a grin. "From subway shadows to spotlight stardom. You planning to slow down any time soon?" "Never," Claire said. "But maybe I'll sleep more." Lucas pulled out a newspaper. "You made the cover again. But this time, it's for the recital." She rolled her eyes. "It's not about me anymore." "Maybe," Lucas said, "but people need someone to root for, and you gave them a melody worth chasing." Later that night, as she packed up, her violin, Claire paused. She looked out over the empty seats again and whispered to no one in particular, "I'm still here." And for the first time in a long, long time, she believed it. The day of the recital arrived, cloaked in crisp autumn air and a sky painted with streaks of silver clouds. The conservatory buzzed with anticipation. Students in black concert attire scurried between halls, volunteers adjusted lighting rigs, and soft scales echoed down the corridors. For Claire, it wasn't just another concert. It was the sound of returning. She stood backstage, gazing at the rows of chairs filling steadily with strangers, friends, survivors, and skeptics. Somewhere out there were former donors of the Blake Foundation, critics of her resurgence, and young musicians who had learned her name not through tabloids, but through sheet music. The irony was poetic. Ethan appeared beside her, straightening his cuffs. "Nervous?" he asked. "More than I was the night of the gala," Claire admitted. "There's no fury to hide behind now, just music." "That's where you're strongest," he said. "You always have been." The lights dimmed. The MC spoke briefly, then gestured toward the wings. Claire stepped onto the stage to soft applause, her silhouette sharp beneath the spotlight. She walked to the grand piano, her violin resting on the bench, and spoke into the mic. "Tonight is not a concert," she began. "It's a conversation between pain and recovery, between silence and expression, between who I was and who I've become." She paused. "When everything was taken from me, music was what I had left, and eventually it gave me back my name, my father, my voice. So tonight I'm sharing that voice with you." The room held its breath. She picked up her violin. The opening piece was gentle, simple in structure but emotionally rich. The students followed her lead with surprising maturity. Together they wove a tapestry of sound that silenced every cough, every whisper. As they reached the final note, a woman in the front row quietly dabbed her eyes. Claire noticed, and for a split second her bow faltered, not from fear, but recognition. That woman had testified during Gregory's trial. Between performances, Ethan stepped forward. Every student on this stage has overcome something, and every note they play is proof of that journey. Then, with a wink, he turned to Claire, including the most stubborn musician I know. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Claire shook her head, half amused, half mortified. But when the final act approached, the original piece Claire and Ethan had composed just days before, her nerves faded. This was what it was all for. The piece began with a single piano note, then strings joined, building slowly like a sunrise. Claire played as if drawing from the earth itself, each bow stroke measured, defiant, alive. When the crescendo hit, the air itself felt charged. People leaned forward, breath caught, and in that climax Claire felt it. Not applause, not victory, but resonance. As the final notes dissolved into stillness, the hall erupted into applause, not frenzied but full-bodied, deep, gratitude layered into every clap. Students wept, strangers embraced. Claire bowed deeply, then turned and bowed to her students. They had carried her melody just as much as she had led theirs. Backstage, Lila approached her, hands still shaking. "I didn't mess up, did I?" Claire crouched to her level. "You didn't just play music, you told a story. That's what makes you great." Lila grinned through tears. "Can I come back next season?" "Only if you bring your fire," Claire teased. Outside, under the amber glow of street lamps, Claire stood with Ethan and her father. They watched guests trickle out, chatting excitedly, already anticipating the next recital. Her father said, "Your mother would have said tonight proved that beauty doesn't need permission." Claire nodded. "And neither does truth." Ethan took her hand. "We did it." She looked at him, her gaze soft but steady. "No, they did it. Every voice silenced, every story buried. Tonight we played for them." The three of them stood in silence, not to avoid speaking, but because some moments need no words, just presence, just sound lingering in the still air like an echo refusing to fade. And somewhere far from the halls of power and performance, Claire's melody found new ears, young ones, forgotten ones, ready to listen and maybe one day ready to play it forward. The days after the recital passed in a blur of media inquiries, student applications, and unexpected quiet. Claire had expected a deluge of attention, and it came, but none of it felt invasive. People weren't chasing a scandal anymore. They were chasing her story, not for spectacle, but for strength. She sat in the conservatory's office, sorting through letters, real, handwritten ones, survivors of abuse, music teachers in remote towns, students who had watched her performance online and picked up instruments for the first time. Claire read each one slowly, tears forming in the spaces between words. "They're not writing to a celebrity," she said to Ethan. "They're writing to a mirror." Ethan looked up from the piano bench, where he was arranging next season's set list. "Because you let them see themselves. You played what they never had the words for." She smiled. "That's what music is, isn't it? Emotion, undiluted," he nodded. "And now you're giving them a voice." Meanwhile, Gregory Blake's trial loomed. Every day, new evidence emerged, testimonies from former employees, documents Claire had uncovered, secret recordings that Lucas had tracked down. Gregory's lawyers fought to delay proceedings, but momentum was against them. The tide had turned, and no amount of influence could hold it back. Claire was called to testify. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the concert hall, cold, echoless. The judge sat like a statue. Gregory, older and more worn than ever, stared at her with disdain, masked as calm. But Claire didn't waver. She spoke clearly, directly. "You took everything from me, and I survived anyway. That's what truth does. It survives, even when we think it can't." The room fell silent as she finished. Gregory said nothing, not because he didn't want to, but because, for once, no one was listening to him. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Claire kept her head down. Her father waited by the car. "She would have been proud," he said. "You honored her the best way you could." Claire touched his arm. "We honored her. Together." That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She wandered through the conservatories, halls, her footsteps echoing faintly. The moonlight poured in through the windows, turning the floor silver. She ended up in the recital room and sat at the piano, not to play, but to be still. Ethan found her there. He sat beside her quietly. "Couldn't sleep either." She shook her head. "I keep thinking, what if it all fades? The impact, the truth, the memory. What if it becomes just another headline?" Ethan reached over and played a single note. "Then we play it again and again, until the silence remembers." Claire smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." "No," he said, "but I always know when not to talk." Later that week, Claire was invited to a private ceremony, an award given by a National Arts Foundation for her contribution to music and advocacy. She accepted it, but only under one condition, that she could perform with her students, not alone. At the event, as they stood ready to play, Claire noticed something. Lila and 3 other girls had formed a string quartet outside the curriculum. They named themselves the Firelight Ensemble. Claire laughed. "Why that name?" Lila grinned. "Because your story started with fire, but it didn't end there." Claire looked at the audience, a sea of supporters. Among them, survivors, mentors, family. She turned to her students and whispered, "Play loud, play true." And they did. The room swelled with emotion, not from her, but from those rising beside her. Her legacy wasn't a solo, it was a harmony. Backstage, someone handed Claire a letter, no name, just a wax seal. Inside was a single sentence: "Forgiveness is not for the forgiven, it's for the free." Claire stared at the words, unsure whether they were meant to comfort or challenge. Either way, they stayed with her, and in the silence that followed, she began to understand that not all echoes are painful. Some, when repeated, become something new entirely. Winter settled across the city in soft layers. Snow-blanketed rooftops muffled traffic and transformed the conservatory into a glowing haven. Inside, warmth radiated from the music, the chatter, the gentle hum of space being used for healing, rather than hiding. But Claire felt a restless edge, not anxiety, something deeper, a sense that something remained unresolved. The mysterious letter she had received, days earlier, sat unopened on her desk. She'd read the line dozens of times: "Forgiveness is not for the forgiven, it's for the free." But now, something about its handwriting nudged at her memory. One evening, she compared it with an old journal her mother had once kept. The penmanship matched, not her mother's, but her father's. Confused, Claire confronted him in their small kitchen. He looked older under the fluorescent light, but calmer than he'd ever seemed before. "Did you send this?" she asked. He paused. "I did. I didn't want to confuse you. I just wanted you to feel it without knowing who asked." Claire lowered the letter. "You want me to forgive Gregory?" Her father hesitated. "Not for him. For you. I spent years hating him. It kept me alive, yes, but it also kept me frozen." Claire sat down. "I don't know if I can. Not yet." "Then don't," he said. "But remember, you're allowed to let go when you're ready." Later that week, news broke that Gregory Blake had accepted a plea deal. He would avoid prison in exchange for full financial restitution and an admission of guilt broadcast live. The deal enraged the public, but Claire wasn't surprised. He was still maneuvering, even from the losing end. The broadcast aired on a Friday evening. Gregory stood at a courtroom podium, older, thinner, wearing a tailored suit like armor. "I exploited the trust placed in me," he said flatly. "I lied, I hurt people, I manipulated truth, and I deserve the consequences that follow." But there was no remorse in his voice, just compliance. Claire turned the TV off halfway through. "He still doesn't believe it matters." Ethan, sitting beside her, said, "Then we prove it does, by outlasting him, by outgrowing him." They spent the weekend working on a new piece, something entirely different. No themes of pain or loss, just something alive, bright, messy. Claire called it The Incomplete Joy. "Why that name?" Ethan asked. She smiled. "Because nothing perfect is honest, and joy rarely finishes clean." On Monday morning, an unexpected call arrived from a historical archivist in Pennsylvania. "Miss Whitmore, we're restoring records from a burned property registered under your mother's name. During excavation, we found something intact, a metal lockbox, with your name on it." Claire and Ethan flew out the next day. The property, her childhood cabin, was little more than charred, foundation and brittle trees. But the box, sealed and heat-scarred, had survived. Inside, photos, recordings, and a diary her mother had hidden before the fire. Claire read the first entry aloud, standing in the snow. "They'll come for me soon, but not for Claire. I made sure of that. If she lives, if she remembers, she will finish this song. She will make them hear it, even if I no longer can." Claire fell silent. She stared out over the land that once held her childhood and the flames that ended it. "She knew," she whispered. "She planned for this." Ethan put an arm around her. "She believed in what you'd become." "No," Claire said. "She believed in what we'd do together." They brought the diary back to Chicago. Claire published excerpts alongside her compositions, framing each piece with a passage from her mother's words. It became a collection, echoes of the violin, half memoir, half score. It went viral. One evening, while signing copies after a performance, Claire noticed a woman lingering at the back of the line, elderly, weathered, but alert. When she stepped forward, Claire froze. "I knew your mother," the woman said softly. "I was the last person she spoke to before she disappeared." Claire's heart raced. "Why didn't you ever come forward?" The woman reached into her coat and handed Claire an envelope. "Because I was scared, but not anymore." Inside was a photograph, Claire's mother and the woman arm in arm, with a younger Claire in the background. On the back, "Tell her she has more family than she knows." Spring came quietly, like a song remembered in fragments. Buds bloomed across the conservatory's courtyard, and the city seemed to breathe a little easier. Inside, life moved on. Students practiced, Claire taught, and laughter spilled from practice rooms. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Claire sat on the rooftop garden Ethan had built with the students, staring out at the skyline. In her lap, the photo from the woman still lingered, her mother, so vivid it almost hurt. She flipped it again. "Tell her she has more family than she knows." That line had consumed her for days. She and Ethan tracked down the woman. Her name was Eliza Monroe, a social worker and once a close friend of Claire's mother. Over coffee, Eliza revealed the truth. Claire's mother had a sister, estranged from the family, quiet, private, living under a different name after a scandal Claire's mother tried to protect her from. "She lives in Vermont now," Eliza said, "owns a bookstore by the mountains." She never knew the full story, but she always asked about Claire, too. Weeks later, Claire stood outside the bookstore, quaint, ivy-draped, the smell of old paper and pine wafting through the air. A wind chime tinkled as she stepped inside. Behind the counter, a woman looked up, older but unmistakably connected. Her, cheekbones, her hands. "Can I help?" she began, then stopped. Her eyes widened. "You're Claire." Claire nodded. "You're my aunt." There were tears, awkward embraces, long, tangled conversations, but through it all a new truth emerged. Her mother had built bridges even when the world tried to burn them, and Claire had inherited that quiet strength. Back in Chicago, Claire folded this new chapter into her work. The conservatory expanded. A second campus opened in Vermont near her aunt's bookstore. Music therapy programs grew, scholarships flourished. The Legacy Fund became a national model. One afternoon during a community concert, Claire sat in the wings watching a group of teenage girls play her composition. The firelight from the stage hit their faces, and Claire felt something unexpected, not pride, not nostalgia. Peace. After the concert, Ethan found her alone in the hallway, running her fingers across the polished wood railing. "You didn't cry this time," he said. Claire smiled. "I didn't need to. They cried for me." He held out a small velvet box. "You're impossible to surprise," he said, opening it to reveal a thin silver bracelet engraved with the words "Play Anyway." But this felt right. Claire took it, tracing the engraving. "It is." She wore it every day after. The years passed. The world kept turning. New students came and went. Claire's name faded from headlines and found a quieter place, on music stands, in journals, in whispered reverence from young musicians. She never chased fame. She didn't need to. Her legacy wasn't carved in marble, but in sound, in safety. In the silence, she taught others to break. On the 10th anniversary of the recital that changed everything, a national orchestra premiered The Last Note, a symphony co-written by Claire and Ethan. It was performed by survivors, by teachers, by those whose lives had been rewritten through music. As the final movement began, Claire stood in the back row, bow in hand. Her students now stood center stage. She smiled, closed her eyes, and played. The music rose, not loud or perfect, but full of life. It echoed across the hall, through every seat, into every corner where pain once hid. And when it ended, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was whole. Wow. What a story, right? I'd love to hear what you thought. Drop a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tell me where you're watching from. And hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out the other stories we have on the channel. There's so much more waiting for you.